The research vessel GCS Harmony moved quietly through space near a star system that no one had studied before. Senior xenobiologist Kethver sat at his workstation looking at readings that made no sense. His 6 arms moved quickly across the controls as he checked the sensors again and again. The third planet from the star showed signs of life that should not be possible. Kethver had studied alien life for 200 years. He had seen planets with simple bacteria and worlds with complex animals, but this planet was different. The readings showed a level of biological complexity that broke every rule he knew about how life develops. His skin turned pale blue with worry as he called for his commander. Commander Zephan walked over to the science station. His crystal body glowed with different colors as he thought about what he was seeing. Zephan had been in charge of first contact missions for 3 centuries. He had met dozens of new species and helped them join the galactic community. But he had never seen anything like the readings from this small blue planet. The planet orbited a yellow star that the navigation computer had labeled Sol 3. The beings living there had learned how to split atoms and travel in spaceships, according to galactic law. This meant they were ready to be studied before formal contact could be made. What was not normal was how adaptable these beings seemed to be. Far below on the planet's surface, Dr. Lisa Adams worked late in her laboratory in Atlanta. She was a scientist who studied tiny organisms that cause disease. She had no idea that alien sensors were watching her every move from space. Lisa was preparing blood samples from different human populations around the world. She wanted to understand how human genes varied from place to place. The alien scanners recorded every piece of genetic information they could find. They looked at DNA from people in hot deserts and cold mountains. They studied genes from island populations and city dwellers. What they found made no sense according to everything they knew about how species evolve. Kethver ran the first genetic analysis and his skin turned even paler. Human DNA was not just diverse, it was impossible. The genetic code showed traits that should have killed any species that developed them. Humans could resist poisons that would kill most galactic species in seconds. Their cells could heal damage faster than physics should allow. Most frightening of all, their brains showed patterns that suggested they could adapt to almost anything. The alien scientists looked at genetic markers that told the story of human survival. These beings had lived through ice ages that should have frozen them to death. They had survived volcanic eruptions that should have poisoned their air and blocked their sun. They had endured plagues that should have wiped them from existence. Instead of dying, they had become stronger each time. On Earth, Captain Jake Morrison led his Special Forces team through training exercises in the mountains of Colorado. The soldiers moved through snow and thin air with ease. They adapted to changes in temperature and altitude without complaint. They solved tactical problems that their instructors thought were impossible. Hidden alien drones recorded everything, and the observers could not believe what they were seeing. The human soldiers performed physical tasks that should have been beyond their capabilities. When faced with challenges designed to test their limits, they found ways to exceed those limits instead. They worked together in ways that amplified each individual's abilities. Most disturbing to the alien watchers, the humans seemed to enjoy the difficult challenges. Dr. Rachel Thompson worked in her genetics laboratory at Harvard Medical School. She was studying human evolution and had found something that puzzled her. The genetic evidence suggested that humans had nearly gone extinct multiple times throughout their history. But instead of being weakened by these near-death experiences, they seemed to have emerged stronger and more adaptable each time. What Rachel did not know was that her research was being transmitted directly to alien scientists who were becoming more frightened with each discovery. The genetic timeline she was building showed a pattern that terrified species across the galaxy. Humans did not just survive disasters. They learned from them and became better prepared for the next challenge. Kethver compiled his preliminary report with shaking hands. The humans were not just another intelligent species that had developed technology. They were something far more dangerous. Their genetic code suggested they were the ultimate survivors, capable of adapting to any threat. the universe could present. The alien scientist had studied the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy. He had seen species destroy themselves with war or pollution. He had watched others stagnate and fade into irrelevance. But he had never encountered a species that seemed designed by evolution itself to overcome any obstacle, the most terrifying. Discovery was hidden in the neural pathways that the brain scans revealed. Human consciousness was not fixed like that of other species. Their minds could rewire themselves when faced with new challenges. They could learn skills that took other species generations to develop. They could adapt their thinking patterns to solve problems that no one had ever faced before, Commander. Zephan read the report, and his crystalline body turned the deep red color of alarm. In 300 years of first contact missions, he had never felt the need to contact the Galactic Council for emergency guidance. Every species they had encountered could be understood within the framework of known biological and evolutionary law. But humans were different. These beings represented something new and potentially catastrophic. If they ever realized their full potential, if they ever understood what their genetic code truly contained, they could become unstoppable. The galaxy had seen wars between species before, but never had it faced a species that seemed engineered by nature itself to survive and thrive. Under any conditions, Kethver sent his findings to the Galactic Council with a priority level that had not been used in over 1,000 years. His message was simple but chilling. The beings on Sol 3 were not just another species seeking to join the galactic community. They were potentially the most dangerous biological weapon the universe had ever created, and they did not even know it yet. 3 weeks after the emergency message reached the Galactic Council, representatives from 47 different species gathered on Nexus Prime. The massive space station served as neutral ground where all galactic civilizations could meet safely. The great chamber buzzed with sounds that no human ear could understand, clicks from insect-like beings, harmonic songs from crystalline entities, and bioluminescent flashes from creatures that lived in the deep ocean worlds. High Chancellor Vexville called the session to order. His species had survived the last great galactic war 5,000 years ago by being extremely careful about potential threats. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed Earth rotating slowly, surrounded by streams of data that made even the most advanced species nervous. Chancellor Vexville began, speaking through mental projections that translated into each species' native communication method. The discovery on Sol 3 challenged everything they understood about biological limits and evolutionary development. Never before had they encountered a species that seemed to break the fundamental rules of how life develops and survives on Earth. Captain Jake Morrison continued training his Special Forces unit in the Colorado Mountains. The soldiers had no idea that invisible alien drones were recording their every movement. As his team adapted to extreme altitude, bitter cold, and complex tactical scenarios, the alien observers documented capabilities that should have been impossible for any biological being. The human soldiers could function effectively in conditions that would incapacitate most galactic species within minutes. Their bodies adapted to thin air by producing more oxygen-carrying cells in their blood. Their minds processed multiple tactical variables simultaneously while under extreme physical stress. Most importantly, they showed no signs of giving up even when faced with scenarios designed to be unwinnable. Dr. Rachel Thompson made another disturbing discovery in her Harvard laboratory. Her research into human evolutionary history revealed genetic markers suggesting that humans had survived at least 12 different extinction-level events. Each time, instead of being reduced to a small, weakened population, they had emerged with new capabilities and greater adaptability. The Galactic Council's Xenobiology Division received Dr. Thompson's research data through their monitoring systems. What terrified them was not just that humans had survived these catastrophes, but how they had survived them. The genetic evidence showed that human DNA contained backup systems and alternative pathways that activated only under extreme stress. Counselor Ithmara, the Council's leading expert on species behavior, presented her analysis of human psychology. Her findings were deeply disturbing to the assembled representatives. Humans possessed something they called spite, the ability to continue fighting even when victory was mathematically impossible, simply to deny their enemies any satisfaction from winning. The behavioral analysis revealed that humans had a saying that perfectly captured this mindset: if I am going down, I am taking you with me. This was not the rational calculation of a species that weighed costs and benefits. This was something far more dangerous, a willingness to destroy themselves and their enemies rather than accept defeat. Lieutenant Commander Danny Hayes led a search and rescue operation in California after a major earthquake. His team worked for 72 hours straight without significant rest, breathing air contaminated with toxic gases from broken chemical plants. They continued functioning despite injuries that would have forced other galactic species to retreat. The alien observers watched in growing horror as the humans not only survived these conditions, but seemed to thrive under the pressure. The Council's medical experts analyzed the human rescue workers and found physiological changes that defied their understanding of biology. Under extreme stress, human cellular metabolism increased efficiency rather than breaking down. Their immune systems became more effective when exposed to multiple toxins simultaneously. Their neural networks formed new connections that improved problem-solving abilities during crisis situations. Dr. Beth Collins worked at an archaeological site in Africa, unaware that her discoveries were being transmitted to an increasingly frightened galactic community. She had uncovered human remains that showed evidence of survival during a supervolcanic eruption that should have wiped out all complex life in the region. The DNA analysis revealed something that made the Council's blood run cold. The ancient human remains contained genetic markers indicating that the population had not just survived the volcanic winter that followed the eruption. They had actually increased in number during this period. While other species on Earth went extinct or nearly extinct, humans had found ways to turn the global catastrophe into an opportunity for expansion and adaptation. Chief Science Advisor Mel Thune presented the Council with a pattern analysis that showed the true scope of the threat. Every time humans faced an existential challenge, they did not just adapt to survive it, they evolved new capabilities that made them stronger than before. Their DNA suggested they had survived asteroid impacts, ice ages, solar flares, volcanic winters, and pandemic diseases that had destroyed countless other species. The debate that followed would echo through galactic history for millennia. Some Council members argued for immediate contact and integration, believing that humans could become valuable allies if properly guided. They pointed out that human creativity and adaptability could solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. Others pushed for complete quarantine, arguing that humans should be isolated until they either destroyed themselves or evolved beyond their dangerous phase naturally. These representatives feared that contact with galactic civilization would accelerate human development in unpredictable and potentially catastrophic ways, but it was the discovery made during the final week of investigation that sealed humanity's fate. Navy SEAL Chris Baker was conducting underwater demolitions training when the monitoring systems detected something that changed everything. Under extreme physical stress, his blood chemistry showed patterns that matched theoretical models for evolutionary acceleration. The implications were staggering. Humans could apparently trigger their own evolution in real time when faced with sufficient environmental pressure. Their DNA contained dormant sequences that could activate new biological capabilities within a single generation when survival demanded it. This was not gradual adaptation over thousands of years. This was conscious evolution happening in decades or even years. The Council faced a terrible choice. They could make contact and risk accelerating human development into something beyond their ability to control. They could quarantine humanity and hope that isolation would keep them stable. Or they could take more extreme measures that none of them wanted to consider. Chancellor Vexthal called for a recess to allow each delegation to consult with their homeworlds. As the representatives dispersed throughout Nexus Prime, one thing was clear to everyone present. Humanity represented either the galaxy's greatest opportunity or its greatest threat. and the decision they made in the coming days would determine which it would be. Dr. Amanda Foster had spent 15 years studying cancer at Johns Hopkins Medical Center. She worked long hours in her laboratory, trying to find ways to reprogram damaged cells back to health. Amanda had no idea that her breakthrough discovery would trigger the most classified decision in galactic history. Her research had accidentally unlocked humanity's most terrifying secret hidden deep within their DNA. The Galactic Council's biological analysis teams worked around the clock to understand what they had found. Human DNA was not just a genetic code that determined physical traits and capabilities. It was something far more complex and dangerous, a biological archive that contained the genetic memory of every major challenge the human species had ever faced throughout their evolutionary history. Kethver presented his findings to an emergency council session. His 6 arms trembled as he explained what the deep genetic analysis had revealed. Human DNA contained solutions to problems that humans had never encountered in their current environment. In essence, their genetic code was like a vast library of survival strategies waiting to be activated when the right conditions occurred. Colonel Danny Hayes led his rescue team through the rubble of buildings destroyed by the California earthquake. His soldiers worked for days without proper rest, breathing air filled with concrete dust and chemical contamination. They lifted debris that should have required mechanical equipment and continued functioning despite injuries that would have stopped other species completely. The alien observers recorded everything with growing alarm. What terrified the Council most was not just what the humans could do, but how they did it. Under extreme stress, the rescue workers began showing physiological changes that matched genetic markers in their DNA. Their bodies were accessing backup systems and alternative biological pathways that had been dormant until the crisis activated them. The real shock came when Dr. Beth Collins made what seemed like a routine archaeological discovery in Africa. She uncovered human skeletal remains from a site that had been devastated by a supervolcanic eruption 75,000 years ago. The eruption should have killed everything within 1,000 miles and created a nuclear winter that lasted for years. But the DNA analysis of these ancient remains told a different story. The humans who lived through the volcanic catastrophe had not just survived, they had actually thrived during the years following the eruption. Their genetic code showed adaptations that allowed them to process nutrients from sources that other species could not use. They had developed enhanced lung capacity to deal with ash-filled air and improved vision for seeing in reduced sunlight. Chief Science Advisor Melthune addressed the assembled council with facts that challenged everything they knew about evolutionary biology. The pattern was clear and consistent throughout human history. Every time the species faced an extinction-level threat, they did not just barely survive, they emerged from the crisis stronger and more capable than before. The genetic timeline showed at least 12 different occasions when humans should have gone extinct completely. Ice ages that froze most of the planet, asteroid impacts that blocked sunlight for years, volcanic eruptions that poisoned the atmosphere, and pandemic diseases that killed most other species. Each time, humans had not only survived, but had gained new capabilities that prepared them for even greater challenges. Lieutenant Commander Chris Baker pushed his Navy SEAL team through underwater demolitions, training in conditions that tested the absolute limits of human endurance. The alien monitoring systems recorded blood oxygen levels, cellular metabolism rates, and neural activity patterns that defied their understanding of biological possibility. During the most extreme phases of training, Baker's physiology began showing changes that matched dormant genetic sequences in his DNA. His body was essentially rewriting its own biological programming in real time to meet the demands being placed on it. This was not adaptation that happened over generations. This was conscious evolution occurring within hours or days. The discovery that truly terrified the Galactic Council came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amanda Foster's cancer research had revealed that human DNA contained what she called genetic switches, dormant sequences, that could be activated to reprogram cellular function. What she did not realize was that these switches were not random evolutionary artifacts but carefully preserved. Survival mechanisms. The Council's xenobiologists ran simulations based on the genetic patterns they had discovered. The results were nightmarish from their perspective. If humans ever faced a severe enough threat, their DNA could activate capabilities that would make them virtually unstoppable. Enhanced physical strength, improved cognitive processing, resistance to radiation and toxins, accelerated healing. And most terrifying of all, the ability to adapt to completely alien environments. Dr. Peter Johnson worked late in his genetics laboratory at Cambridge University, analyzing migration patterns of ancient human populations. His research showed that every time humans had encountered a new environment, they had not just adapted to it, they had completely mastered it within a few generations. From Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, from high mountain peaks to ocean islands, humans had made every environment on Earth their home. The alien observers found this pattern deeply disturbing because it suggested that environmental challenges did not limit human expansion, they accelerated it. Each new habitat that humans encountered seemed to unlock additional genetic capabilities that made them even more adaptable to future challenges. Elder Veskemi of the ancient Kethmori species spoke to the Council with the authority of 10,000 years of experience. Her people had gone through their own evolutionary acceleration phase in the distant past, and she knew the signs of a species on the verge of biological transcendence. The humans showed every marker that preceded the most dangerous period in Kethmori history. The Kethmori had nearly destroyed the galaxy during their awakening phase. Their rapidly evolving capabilities had made them arrogant and aggressive toward species they saw as inferior. Only a devastating civil war that lasted for centuries had finally brought them under control. Elder Veshemi warned that humans might follow the same path, but with far more dangerous starting capabilities. Marine Sergeant Tony Garcia demonstrated the human tendency that most worried the Council during survival training in the Amazon rainforest. Faced with conditions designed to be impossible, told by his instructors that failure was expected, Garcia not only succeeded but invented new survival techniques that his trainers had never considered. His success was not despite the impossible odds, it was because of them. This psychological trait appeared throughout human history and culture. When told something could not be done, humans seemed to take it as a personal challenge. When faced with impossible odds, they became more determined rather than giving up. This combination of genetic adaptability and psychological stubbornness created a species that would never accept limits on what they could achieve. The final report submitted to the Galactic Council contained a warning that would haunt their decision-making for generations. Humans were not just another intelligent species that had developed technology. They were a biological weapon that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting. Their DNA contained the solutions to survival challenges that most species had never even imagined facing. If humans ever realized what their genetic code truly contained, if they ever learned to consciously activate their dormant capabilities, they would become something beyond the Council's ability to contain or control. The question facing the galaxy was not whether humanity would eventually transcend their current limitations, but whether galactic civilization would survive when they did. The vote that would determine humanity's fate was closer than anyone on the Galactic Council had expected. 24 species voted for immediate quarantine, believing that isolation was the only way to prevent humans from becoming a galactic threat. 22 species voted for cautious contact, arguing that guidance from advanced civilizations could help humans develop safely. One species abstained from voting entirely, unable to decide between the two options. The deciding factor came from Elder Veskemi of the Kethmori, whose species had survived their own evolutionary acceleration phase 10,000 years ago. Her ancient form barely maintained physical coherence after millennia of life, but her words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. She spoke of what happens when a species discovers its true genetic potential without proper guidance or restraint. The Kethmori had nearly destroyed the galaxy during their awakening period. Their rapidly evolving capabilities had made them believe they were superior to all other forms of life. They had conquered dozens of star systems and enslaved entire species before internal conflicts finally brought their expansion to a halt. Elder Vashimi warned that humans showed all the same genetic markers, but with far more dangerous starting capabilities on Earth. Life continued normally while the galaxy's leaders debated humanity's future. Navy pilot Kelly Wright broke several flight records during what she thought was routine training. She pushed her F-18 Super Hornet beyond its normal operational limits through sheer determination and split-second decision-making. Kelly had no idea that alien observers were recording her performance. As evidence of humanity's terrifying potential, the flight data showed reflexes and spatial processing abilities that should have been impossible for any biological being. Under extreme forces that would have caused most galactic species to lose consciousness, Kelly not only remained alert but actually improved her performance. Her brain seemed to rewire itself in real time to handle the physical stresses of high-speed flight. Dr. Peter Johnson continued his archaeological genetics research at Cambridge University, unaware that his discoveries were being transmitted directly to increasingly frightened alien scientists. His analysis of ancient human migration patterns revealed something that the Council found particularly alarming. Every time humans had encountered a new environment or challenge, they had not just adapted to survive, they had conquered it completely. The genetic evidence showed that humans had spread across Earth by turning every hostile environment into their home. From frozen polar regions to scorching deserts, from high mountain peaks to dense tropical jungles, humans had not just survived, but had made these places centers of thriving civilization. This pattern suggested that environmental challenges did not limit human expansion, they accelerated it. The Galactic Council implemented the most comprehensive quarantine in their recorded history. A network of automated monitoring stations was established throughout the Sol system, each one equipped with the most advanced stealth technology available. These stations were programmed to prevent any human vessel from leaving their local stellar neighborhood while remaining completely invisible to human detection methods. More importantly, all information about humanity's genetic sequence was classified under the highest security protocols that galactic civilization possessed. Only the Council's most trusted xenobiologists would have access to the complete genetic analysis. The reasoning was simple but chilling. If humans ever learned what their DNA truly contained, they might trigger an evolutionary acceleration that could transform them into something beyond anyone's ability to contain. Security Chief Corthane explained the quarantine's dual purpose during a closed session with senior council members. They were not just protecting galactic civilization from humanity, they were also protecting humanity from itself. If humans discovered their genetic potential too quickly, without the wisdom that comes from gradual development, they might follow the same destructive path that had nearly doomed the Kethmori. The decision came with terrible irony that was not lost on the more thoughtful council members. Several species possessed technology that could have advanced human civilization by thousands of years. Medical knowledge that could eliminate disease, energy systems that could end resource conflicts, and transportation methods that could unite their planet in peace. Instead of sharing this knowledge, fear had won out over wisdom. Marine Sergeant Tony Garcia demonstrated why the Council's fears were justified during advanced survival training in the Amazon rainforest. Faced with conditions that his instructors openly admitted were designed to be impossible, Garcia not only succeeded but created new survival techniques that military experts had never considered. His success was not despite the impossible odds. It was specifically because of them. This psychological pattern appeared consistently throughout human culture and history. When told that something could not be done, humans seemed to interpret it as a personal challenge. When faced with barriers that other species would accept as natural limits, humans looked for ways to break through them. This combination of genetic adaptability and psychological stubbornness created a species that would never willingly accept restrictions on their potential. The Council made one critical error in their calculations that would eventually doom their carefully planned quarantine. They assumed that keeping humans isolated within their solar system would keep them stable and prevent dangerous evolutionary acceleration. They failed to account for humanity's greatest strength, their tendency to push against boundaries simply because those boundaries existed. Captain Angela Rodriguez commanded the first human deep space mission to reach the outer edges of their solar system. Her mission was officially designed to study the outer planets and their moons, but Rodriguez and her crew were naturally curious about everything they encountered. When their sensors detected artificial structures throughout the outer system, their response was typically human. They did not retreat in fear, but began systematic analysis to understand what they were looking at. The monitoring stations had been designed to remain undetectable by human technology for at least another 2 centuries of natural development. The Council's scientists had carefully calculated human technological progress and built their stealth systems accordingly, but they had not accounted for human creativity and determination when faced with a puzzle they wanted to solve. Dr. Carl Mitchell worked on theoretical physics at MIT, focusing on faster-than-light communication, systems that most experts believed were centuries away from practical application. When he detected the first anomalous signals from the quarantine network, his response was to immediately begin trying to decipher them rather than dismissing them as equipment malfunctions. The signals that Dr. Mitchell intercepted were never meant to be detected by human technology. They were status reports from the monitoring stations using galactic standard communication protocols. But humans had one advantage that the Council had not considered. They were completely unfamiliar with the assumptions that limited galactic thinking about communication technology, while galactic species had developed their technology along predictable paths over millions of years. Humans approached problems from completely different angles. They used mathematical concepts and physical principles that established civilizations had dismissed as impractical or impossible. This fresh perspective allowed them to detect and analyze signals that should have been beyond their capabilities. The quarantine that was meant to be humanity's cage was slowly becoming the pressure cooker that would forge them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Every barrier the Council erected became a challenge for humans to overcome. Every limitation they imposed became a problem for human creativity to solve. The first cracks in the containment system were already beginning to show, and the beings responsible for humanity's isolation were starting to realize that their carefully constructed prison might actually accelerate the very evolutionary process they had been trying to prevent. 50 years after the Galactic Council established their quarantine around Earth, the first signs of failure began to appear. Dr. Carl Mitchell had spent decades working on theoretical physics at MIT, focusing on communication systems that most scientists believed were impossible. When his equipment started detecting strange signals from the outer edges of the solar system, he did what humans always did when faced with a mystery. He began trying to solve it. The signals Dr. Mitchell discovered were never supposed to be detectable by human technology for at least another 2 centuries. They were status reports and communication protocols from the alien monitoring stations that surrounded Earth, but humans had developed their technology along completely different paths than the galactic species expected, allowing them to detect transmissions that should have remained invisible. Captain Angela Rodriguez commanded the deep space vessel Explorer 1 on humanity's first mission to the outer planets. Her crew was officially studying Jupiter's moons when their sensors detected the quarantine network. The readings showed artificial structures throughout the outer solar system, clearly not natural phenomena, but obviously the product of advanced technology. Rodriguez's response was typically human. She ordered immediate analysis rather than retreat. The discovery that someone had been watching Earth from space sent shockwaves through every government and scientific institution on the planet. For the first time in human history, there was undeniable proof that intelligent life existed beyond Earth and that this alien civilization had been observing humanity for an unknown period of time. Dr. Nina Campbell, a linguist working with Dr. Mitchell's research team, made the breakthrough that changed everything. She realized that the alien signals were not random electromagnetic noise but followed linguistic patterns consistent with a universal translation protocol. Within months of intensive analysis, she had decoded enough of the galactic standard language to understand fragments of the monitoring reports. The fragments that Dr. Campbell translated spoke of quarantine protocols, dangerous genetic sequences, and a galactic council that feared humanity's evolutionary potential. The revelation that Earth was under alien observation specifically because humans were considered dangerous rather than primitive forced a complete reevaluation of humanity's place in the universe, but it was marine biologist Dr. Ray Turner who made the discovery that truly began humanity's awakening. Working with genetic samples from organisms that survived in extreme environments, he found dormant sequences in human DNA that matched patterns in creatures living in conditions no human should be able to tolerate. When he activated these sequences in laboratory conditions, the results defied every law of biology he understood. Dr. Turner's experiments showed that human DNA contained backup systems and alternative biological pathways that could be triggered under the right conditions. Cells that should have died from radiation exposure instead adapted to use the radiation as an energy source. Tissue samples that should have been destroyed by extreme temperatures instead developed new proteins that allowed them to function. Normally in conditions that would kill most known life forms, the trigger for these genetic changes was knowledge itself. The simple awareness that these capabilities existed began activating dormant switches throughout the human population. Athletes around the world began breaking records that should have been physically impossible. Scientists made intuitive leaps that bypassed decades of traditional research. Most disturbing from the Galactic Council's perspective, humans began demonstrating the ability to adapt to hazardous conditions in real time. On Nexus Prime, emergency sessions of the Galactic Council convened daily as alarming reports flooded in from the monitoring stations around Earth. Humans were evolving at a rate that had never been observed in any species throughout galactic history. The careful quarantine that was supposed to keep them contained had instead provided exactly the pressure they needed to begin unlocking their genetic potential. Olympic swimmer Katie Johnson broke multiple world records during training sessions that pushed her body beyond what medical science said was possible. Her blood chemistry showed changes that allowed her cells to process oxygen more efficiently than any known biological system. Her muscle tissue developed new fiber types that generated more power while using less energy. Most importantly, these changes were happening within weeks rather than generations. The pattern repeated itself across every field of human endeavor. Construction workers began lifting loads that should have required mechanical assistance. Pilots flew aircraft beyond their normal performance envelopes through pure skill and determination. Surgeons performed operations with precision that their training should not have made possible. In every case, the humans involved had no idea. They were exceeding the biological limits that governed every other known species. Dr. Amanda Foster's cancer research at Johns Hopkins had accidentally unlocked the key to understanding human genetic potential. Her work on cellular reprogramming had revealed that human DNA contained what she called genetic switches, dormant sequences that could be activated to fundamentally alter cellular function. What she did not initially understand was that these switches were not random evolutionary artifacts but carefully preserved survival mechanisms. The most terrifying reports reaching the Galactic Council came from human space missions. Astronauts working on the International Space Station began showing adaptations to zero gravity that should have taken thousands of years to develop. Their bone density increased rather than decreased in weightlessness. Their cardiovascular systems became more efficient rather than weaker. Their vision actually improved in the harsh radiation environment of space. Chancellor Vexthal called an emergency session to address what everyone now recognized as a complete failure of the quarantine strategy. The crystalline being's body had darkened to the deep purple color that indicated absolute dread as he addressed the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. The Chancellor explained that the quarantine had failed in the worst possible way. By trying to contain humanity, they had created exactly the pressure that humans needed to begin their evolutionary acceleration. The humans knew they were being watched. They knew they were being contained. And their response was precisely what the Council should have expected from a species that viewed every limitation as a challenge to overcome. Dr. Lisa Martinez, working at the Centers for Disease Control, made a discovery that sent the final alarm signal to the galactic observers. Her research into human immune system responses revealed that exposure to alien genetic material was triggering rapid adaptations in human DNA. Somehow, the monitoring systems themselves were providing genetic information that human cells could incorporate and use to develop new capabilities. The realization hit the Galactic Council like a physical blow. The quarantine stations that were supposed to keep humans contained were inadvertently providing them with genetic templates from advanced galactic species. Human cells were reverse engineering alien biology and incorporating the most useful traits into their own genetic structure. They were not just evolving on their own, they were stealing evolutionary advantages from every species that observed them. Security Chief Carthane presented the final assessment to a council chamber filled with beings who now understood the magnitude of their mistake. Humans were not trying to escape their cage or destroy their captors. They were systematically analyzing the quarantine technology to understand how it worked so they could build something better. The species that the Council had tried to contain was now learning from their most advanced technology. The monitoring station's artificial intelligence systems began reporting an observation that would haunt galactic civilization for generations to come. Human technology was advancing at an exponential rate that would allow them to surpass Council capabilities within 12 years. The recommended course of action from the AI was both simple and terrifying. Pray that humans remembered the Council had tried to be merciful rather than destructive. The final entry in humanity's quarantine file was added by an unknown hand and contained a simple statement that captured the essence of the Council's greatest fear and perhaps their only remaining hope. Instead of building cages to contain a dangerous species, they should have tried to make friends with the beings who were destined to inherit the galaxy. In laboratories across Earth, human scientists continued their work with growing excitement about the discoveries they were making about their own capabilities. They had no idea that they were fulfilling the galaxy's greatest nightmare while potentially becoming its salvation. The awakening had begun, and nothing in the known universe could stop it now.